This conference will now be recorded.
Well, welcome everybody. We appreciate you being here. Just another reminder, if when you're not asking questions, if you'll just mute your microphone, that way we make sure we don't get any private conversations or background noise from wherever you're at. We have a lot of people online and we welcome you to the meeting tonight. I just wanted to review a couple of items with you. We had a great trap shoot last night. We had, I'd say, about 65, 70 members of the UPHCA compete against ABC Association, and we had a good time and good food. X3 Trades provided the food, and it was just a great night. So we appreciate everybody participating in that. Hopefully the summer has been good to you. We are coming to the end of the summer and going into the winter months soon. So hopefully you had a good time during the summer. I'm going to be sending out a survey in the next few days that I'd like you to look at carefully. It won't take very long. It will take maybe 4 minutes to fill it out, but it's just to help try to determine what the best way going forward with monthly meetings and different things that we'll be looking at, monthly meetings, maybe changing to quarterly meetings or whatever, because I know everybody's very busy and taking the night to come to a meeting is difficult at best. So we want to get some of your ideas and so forth that we can do this as the best that we can for all of you. Also, I just want to express a thank you to our sponsors. We're indebted to them. They really do keep our membership fees low, and with their great support and sponsors and so forth of their different events, we appreciate them. We welcome you here tonight. This will count as 1 hour core, and Jason has been an instructor of ours for now going on, I think, 3 or 4 years. He does an excellent job for us. He teaches all the plumbing core classes during that cycle, which will be next year. He's going to be teaching some HVAC classes in October, November to capture some of those who have to have some specialty training in for their contractor license. So we're appreciative of Jason coming and presenting tonight, and this will count as 1 hour core, like I mentioned. So Jason, let's make sure you can be heard, and we'll just turn the time to you.
Okay, well, thank you. Everybody hear me?
I think they can.
Okay. So I guess a little bit of introduction of who I am. For those that haven't been to the classes or participated in any of the trainings before, I am the building official for Springville City. And I've actually been teaching for the Utah Plumbing Heating Contractors Association. I think this is my 7th year. That's how far back I go. So that's it's been a great experience getting to know everybody that's out there in the industry, and hopefully I can continue to be your advocate in a lot of different ways. Even though I am a building official, I strive to make everybody's job as easy as possible. So that's kind of the way I feel. I'm more of a facilitator than I am a code enforcer. With that being said, tonight I wanted to cover a couple of different aspects with some changes that have been occurring over the last couple of years, including some legislation that came upon us this last year that changed some of your licensure requirements and or opened up some windows for us as contractors, and also cover a lot of the state amendments and go a little bit more in depth in regards to what those really mean for you guys as installers. So please feel free to chime in at any time. I like the interaction more so than just talking. So please, if you have questions or if you have experience or something to add, please do so. And I can kind of see who's online. So I can see if you actually unmuted your mic, and we should be able to go from there. But Dave, you'll have to let me know if my screen shows up when I go into some of these websites. But what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be going into a lot of the state code, as well as some references to free codes online, which is the website of the International Code Council, who publishes the IPC that the state of Utah has adopted. So last month, Springville City with DOPL did a 3-hour class for contractors. DOPL helped sponsor that. I've been doing that for 8 or 9 years, I believe now. And DOPL has been kind enough to come in, and they've been talking to contractors a lot about what their rights are. And with last month's meeting, DOPL basically told a lot of the contractors, those that are plumbing contractors, electrical contractors, specialty contractors, that right now is the time to apply for licensure in other fields. And I'll kind of go over some of how that legislation works. We had quite a few changes with House Bill 187, I believe, by Mike Schultz last year, that kind of opened this up. For those of you that have been contractors for some time, your license that ends with a 5501, you can probably remember having to take an exam and show your firstborn child who they were, and all these other things you had to do to try and actually get to become a qualifier for your contractor license. Things have changed a lot. In fact, I'm going to go ahead and jump right into the rules of the Utah legislature that kind of gives guidance on how a lot of this has changed. And it kind of stems over the last couple of years with, I guess, the deregulation of contractors. 2 or 3 years ago, we experienced, for those that have an S350 license, the opening of the window from having to have extensive background and training to an HVAC or mechanical type business to actually qualify to become an S350 license holder. To where now you only have to have 1 year of experience in pretty much any construction trade, and you can now submit an application for any specialty license, including the S350. The only difference is, if you want to get the S350 license, you have to have at least 3 hours directly related to the HVAC industry to maintain that license. So where I'm going to jump to is, I believe it's 304 here, where it talks about some of these hours. So like plumbers and electricians have to have 12 and 16 hours to renew your individual licenses. And if you have a license as a business entity group, then you're going to be required to do only 6 hours. And for those that have a 551 license, you're going to have I believe, 1 hour of energy code training, which starts after this next code cycle renewal. But in this section of the code, R15655A, this is rules that DOPL has come up with based on legislation in Title 58 and 15A, which kind of govern the construction trades in a lot of different ways. 58 deals with licensure. 15A deals with the actual adoption of the plumbing code and any amendments to those. So in 302 of this rule from DOPL, so it's their own personal policies being the governance aspect, or I guess the police department under a legislative council, they've come up with these rules to give them guidance as to how they're going to actually implement that legislature. And so they're the ones that have kind of set forth some parameters for the hours for like an apprenticeship versus a journeyman. We do get some steering from the legislature that shows what it takes to become an apprentice versus going from an apprentice to a journeyman, and then a journeyman to a master, and then ultimately what it would take to get a contractor's license. So the trend right now with the deregulation, this last year, the legislation pretty much wiped out the requirement for having to take an exam. That's to become a B100, R100, or an E100 license holder. So what that means for you as a specialty trade, as either a plumbing general contractor license or residential plumbing contractor or the S350 holder, if you've done the 25-hour course, you can just file a $75 fee plus an application and pretty much now become a B100, an R100, or an E100 qualifying license holder. Now, you can't do that as an individual. You'd have to have some kind of a business set up, an LLC, sole proprietorship, or something. It cannot be given to a person. So you're actually creating a company to do that, but you're taking that next step. And that's how easy it is now for you as a plumber to now go in and become an R100, B100, or B100, R100, and an E100 license holder. So what does that mean to you guys as a plumbing contractor? You guys understand what that opens up for you? Any ideas out there? I'm hearing crickets, which is, I don't know if that's a good sign or a bad sign. But currently oh, go ahead, John.
I was actually just going to ask, is it still required that we have our masters to be contractors?
Yes, to be qualified as a plumbing contractor, to get that 5501 license, you do have to have a master's plumbing license. And then you would have the course of a 25-hour course that you would have had to have taken to get that 5501 license. So because of this course change and the elimination of the hours and experience to get the E100, B100, and R100 licenses, this opens up huge doors for you guys.
So do you no longer have to, what would it be? So you don't have to prove that you have 2 years experience to get your master's then anymore, or?
Oh, that's still the same. So the qualifications between a journeyman to a master's, those all stay the same.
Okay, that's kind of what I was wondering.
Yeah, so those aspects have not changed. But what it has changed is if you have already gone in and applied to become a plumbing contractor, and now have already set up a company, and now have a 5501 license. That means the last 4 digits of your license is a 5501. And the distinction between that is it's not an individual license like a master, journeyman, or apprentice license is. That's issued to the individual. The 5501 license is issued to a corporation, a sole proprietor, LLC, some business identifier that has articles of incorporation and everything else. It's taken it from an individual to now a business format. And if you have already established that as a plumber, you already have a plumbing contractor license, you can now just file a $75 fee with an application to become a B100, R100, or an E100 license holder. So the biggest benefit of this is right now, as just a general plumbing contractor, you can become a subcontractor under a general, currently a B100 or an R100 on a job, to then do the work as the plumbing entity. You cannot sub-hire other trades outside of your own plumbing company to do incidental work. That has to be through a B100, R100, or an E100 license holder. So for an example, if you're working in multifamily high-rise buildings and you have to hire someone that comes in and does drywall patches or fire caulking or whatever else for the work that you did, you technically by law cannot do that as the plumbing contractor. Now you can have an employee that works under your company, W-2 employee, do all that work if it's incidental to the trade by which they're already licensed. But to go out and actually seek another contractor or a subcontractor under you as a subcontractor, you cannot do that. So that has to go through the general contractor. And this is where it gets interesting, because like in the HVAC field, they always hire subcontractors to come in and fulfill a little responsibility of tidying up stuff and whatever else, and they're in violation of state law all the time. So that has to go through the general contractor. So if you were to apply as an R100, B100, and E100 license, that opens you up to that ability to hire subcontractors, because now you're basically a contractor on the job, or at least equal to, because you now have shown proof of financial responsibility. You've taken a 25-hour course through the AGC or Home Builder Association. I believe there's one other that can teach that course is all. And if you're receiving this license after July 1st of this year, there's an additional 5-hour course that you have to go through for business that I believe Doppel can put on, and there's some other agents that can do that as well. So again, the biggest benefit is now.
I have a question for you.
Sure.
Man, you give me like 50 different licenses. How am I supposed to know what I'm supposed to get? Can I walk in somewhere and say, hey, this is what I want to do, what do I got to get? Or am I just supposed to figure it out? Or yeah, how would I figure all this stuff out besides reading the state legislature paperwork and stuff like that?
So as far as like what different licenses you want to hold?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, exactly.
Okay, so I'm going to try and find that here real quick for you. So some of the things with a general contractor, and when I say general contractor from here on out, I'm in reference to that B100, R100, E100 status. This is some of these items that now allow you to open up these doors to where you're now dealing with being able to hire subcontractors, actually manage contracts, doing estimating, bidding on larger responsibility on full job sites, everything else. If I come down to the exemption from licensure, so I'm going to go back. That's probably the easiest way. I just got to find here real quick. The easiest way for us to actually know what's going to be required on that is to know what is exempt, what they consider work, and they also have identified through these rules that as a general contractor that you can only hold 3 specialty licenses. So if you were to become a B100 license holder, you could be a specialty plumber. You can actually hire electricians underneath you now and qualify as an electrical contractor as a subcategory. You can hire HVAC technicians, someone that's got probably RMGA certification for gas line installations, and then also become an S350. So you could then have 3 specialty contractor licenses under your R100 or B100 license, and that's perfectly legal. In fact, that's how some of your companies out there are like the one-stop shop, is under these new rules. As a plumbing contractor, you cannot hire an electrician under your staff and run out and then bid for electrical contracts and stuff unless you are an E100 or B100 qualifier. So I'm going to try and find this real quick here. So the scope of work is right here under 156 55A 301. So this is where your license classifications are in scope of practice. So in your parent groups, your B100, your B200, R100, those are the primary groups. Then you get into some of these subcategories, and then you're going to get into the specialty licenses, and that's everything with the S in front of it. So you can qualify basically as these as up to 3 specialty licenses under a B100 or an R100 license. So you can pick and choose what among these that you want to qualify for, but they will not allow you to do more than 3. And so you can kind of see there's landscaping, there's swimming pools, there's signs, there's foundations, and excavation demolition contractor. So that's kind of where you're going to find out what kind of fits under the scope of that license, what your limitations are, so on and so forth. So here's your S350, which basically allows you to work under these different types of refrigeration rooms, HVAC air handlers, all that stuff's going to fit under that. They even have a radon mitigation contractor, fire suppression. So if you deal with fire suppression systems as a plumber company as well, you could then expand and not have to worry about so many different red tapes that may come into play, or questions of whether it's under the scope of your license or not, if that's what you specialize in. Here's your sign installers. So right here under 4A, I don't know if you guys can see my cursor. It says a licensee may hold up to 3 specialty license classifications in addition to any general contractor classifications, except that an R101 residential and small commercial non-structural remodeling and repair contractor may not have any other specialty classifications. So one of the scenarios that I ran into and keep running into is, as a governmental agency such as Springville City, and I'm their acting building official, it's actually against the law for me to accept and issue a permit to a non-license holder unless they are specifically exempt by the law, which pretty much kicks it back to a single family residence that the individual has the intention of living in that home. Everything else has to be a licensed contractor to do the work. So some of the problems I run into is I get a tenant improvement on a strip mall, for example. Owner comes in, has a contractor, but they want to do a little bit of work, or they know a buddy or whoever else, and they apply for a permit through my office, and say their buddy was a master plumber, but he's not a licensed plumbing contractor. When they bring that permit application and I've got John Doe's name and a 5502 license or a 5503 or 4, whatever license he holds, I cannot accept and approve that permit with that information. It has to end in a 5501 for a plumbing contractor. What that tells me as a city agency is that individual has gone through the necessary steps with the state, shown that they have fiscal or financial responsibility and ability, that they've done their 24-hour class, that they're insured, they're bonded, and they have workman's compensation for anybody that'll be working for on behalf of that company. An individual license holder does not have to do that type of diligence with the state. That's where you're just your straight education, your hours of work on under a company or whatever else to go from an apprentice to a journeyman to a master in your levels. So does that make sense, everyone? You following that? So I have to kick jobs all the time out away from my office to then have the owner go and find a licensed plumbing contractor or electrical contractor or mechanical contractor for those 3 trades specifically. And oftentimes it's usually work is being done without a permit. We shut them down, and then they come in, and lo and behold, everybody that's been working on that job are not appropriately licensed. The other bad part of that law is I'm also legally obligated to report that to DOPL and turn these guys in, which our policy as a city, and I've talked with this with Doppel, is a 3 strikes you're out type thing. And believe it or not, I have several contractors that are on strike too already. And next time they have a violation, they will be reported to the state. So that's kind of my obligation as a government official. So if everybody was taking advantage of the abilities now for the ease of licensure, I mean, all it's now come down to showing financial ability, taking a 25-hour course, putting in an application, and you're going to qualify as a B100 and R100 general contractor. And then you can then go after some of these specialty contract licenses on the side. Did that help clear up that answer or that question?
Yeah, that helped out. Thank you.
You're welcome. So that was under the rules of 156. Again, the scope and practice of those licenses. So here's a category of the license holders. So if you've been in the system for a long time, you may have had some of these older license numbers, and they've now converted over to these specialty licenses. So even like a P202, you're now an S410. And so any of those types of licenses, they can apply for a license to me or a permit to me, and my staff is required to validate that they're actually licensed and qualified for the work they're actually submitting in an application for permit. And it's easy for me to check that because all I have to do is go to Doppel's main website and verify a license. And if they can't provide it to me, then I can't issue the permit. So how many people in our meeting today are the 5501 license holder? Just out of curiosity, are most of you plumbing contractors?
Yeah, we're a plumbing contractor, a P200, I think.
Okay. Yeah, so you're not just a residential.
No. Now, does that give me the ability to hire general contractors? Or
No,
to be
but
a
a
general?
general contractor can hire you.
Okay.
The thing about having a plumbing contractor license, it also allows you to seek bids and sign contracts as the registered plumbing agent on that project. But that does not give you the ability to then turn and hire like an HVAC contractor under some small scope of work or scope of your contract. That should then be deferred to the general contractor unless you hold an S350 license under your company.
Jason, this is Dave Hill. The question that we've been working with is on the 3-foot rule for plumbing contractors. In the past, they could not go beyond 3 foot. We've been in discussions with AGC and so forth, and then Doppel came back and said, it'd make it a lot simpler than trying to change legislation. They just go out and get the specialty license for excavator, and that handles it right there. Pay your fee, and that's all you have to do.
Yeah, and that's the thing is, if you've already got an established plumbing company, it's that easy just to make application and do it. And the reason I want to talk about this tonight specifically as well is the doors that can open up for you and the ease they've made it. Now, that doesn't go without consequence, because now we may have, and this is something I'm going to have to be dealing with in my profession as well as a lot of other people, is now we may have a lot of unqualified people now able to legally work in trades they're not specifically trained in. And that's ultimately why this law was changed, was to open the doors to allow more people, more laborers to come into the market to help out. Because I'm sure every one of you are experiencing the labor strains on versus the amount of work that's out there right now. It's crazy. So that's where I guess I get to come in and be the babysitter on workmanship, which I do not enjoy. I didn't feel I was a quality control individual to begin with as an inspector in the field. We've always been a bare minimum of safety, and now they're kind of turning us into a quality control to weed out professionalism, which is not easy.
Can I ask a question real quick?
Sure.
So let me see if I can summarize this and make sure I understand completely.
Sure.
Plumbing contractor with was it 5501? Is that the correct number?
That's the last 4 digits of your license, yes.
Okay. They cannot hire an electrician or an HVAC guy unless they have the specialty license. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. And to
But
get that specialty license,
right.
to get
now
that specialty license, it's a 25-hour course. Okay. I'm just trying to make sure I understand everything correctly.
Right, but you as a plumbing company cannot do that. You have to be a B100, R100, or an E100 to expand the specialty classes.
Got it. Clear. Thank you very much.
But in that same, I guess, concept of thinking, if you were a B100 license holder now because you already have the 5501 ending and you make that application for $75 to now be a B100 license holder, which then allows you to build any building in the state of Utah other than bridges and infrastructure in public right-of-ways. That's what the E100 license is. You can then turn around and hire a journeyman electrician if you have put in for the electrical contractor's license as well as a specialty subcategory. And then you could open up an S350 license and have mechanical individuals. And now you've got the major trades covered under one company. You wouldn't have to hire all that out independently.
Wow. Okay. Thank you. That was very succinct, cleared it up very much for me. Thank you.
You're welcome. And the danger is, and I'll warn you, is if you apply for the R100 license, you can only do small commercial and residential. You cannot build everything, and that's going to limit you on the size of buildings you can do. So the best one that you would open it up for everything is the B100 license. So if you were to seek after one, that's what my recommendation would be. The inverse of that is I actually get applications on occasion where I have a qualifier that has they show up as a plumbing contractor, have a 5501 license, and when we look up what you've qualified as, you're classified as a residential plumber. That's what you qualified as. By doing so, you cannot do any work outside of residential occupant groups. None. So if you come in and are listed on someone's TI to do one restroom in a business, I can't issue you the license. They have to find someone else. So just make sure you understand and know what license you hold and what you've qualified as. Go for the bigger pictures. It'll open up your possibilities of what you can or can't do for work. So somebody that's worked in the residential trades for most of their profession, and that's what they sought after, that's all they're going to be able to continue to do. So it really limits your market unless that's all you want to deal with. So, but just be aware we have to, as a city agency, watch that and check what you're actually qualified in as and what your license has been issued to you for. Okay, any other questions on licensure? Looks like I've got someone. All right. So the HB 187, which was sponsored by Representative Mike Schultz, who is out of the Clearfield area. I actually used to work with him with Castle Creek Homes when I worked up in Davis County quite often. And this one, Senator Hemmert was the co-sponsor on this. But this is a bill. I won't go through all of it, but this is what it kind of changed a lot of stuff dealing with your license. Basically, now your license fees are going to go up slightly. It opens up access to you as contractors, and or if you're a designer, if you have design teams and stuff, to on here it's actually listed as web-based access to a national, state, and local building codes and standards. That is MADCAD. So if you've heard of the term MADCAD, you're basically paying $1 now for when you go to renew your license this November to help pay for a national subscription, so that all you have to do is email the building official of the state of Utah, Tom Peterson, and he can then send you a login, and you'll have access to a lot of standards that you would otherwise pay hundreds of dollars to buy those books and gain access to. So your architects, your engineers have been using this for several years. Contractors can benefit from it as well. But this bill sets that up. This same bill also is the one that kind of dictates that the Associated General Contractors of Utah, Utah chapter of Associated Builders and Contractors, or the Home Builders Association are the only ones that can teach the 25-hour course in order to get that B100, R100, or E100 license. So that's what this line 7, I'm hoping you guys can all see that. So that's what that underlined section means. This also got rid of the testing requirement, gave some clarification on low voltage wiring and such. So there's quite a few minor changes in here, but the biggest one was that elimination of the test. And I've heard rumors. This one started to do a little bit of what our journeyman to apprentice ratio has to be. It clarified a little bit, but I've heard rumors that we may see a bill this next year that expands that to allow more apprentices under a single journeyman. And that would even increase in the residential market.
Let me clarify that, Jason. The Plumbing Licensing Board was given the authority, as well as the Electrical Board, to make those recommendations to the Construction Services Commission and do that through rulemaking process rather than state statute.
Right.
And the Plumbing Licensing Board has now made that vote this last month to move the, and it has to go through a process which is 3 to 4 months worth. So it's out there a ways before it will be effective, but it will be a 3-to-1 ratio with the plumbers, both commercial and residential.
And they're looking at the same thing for the electrician, so that same number will carry forward there too. Okay. So what Doppel has had the challenge of is on that journeyman and apprentice ratio is, I guess, knowing exactly what it means to be available. And so they're the ones that had to set by rule. Again, that's not by legislative action, that's by rule, a policy, if you will, by Doppel to say if they're within 20 minutes, if I can call them or whatever they've come up with, and that changes. It's been a moving target over the last 10 years or so. But they're hoping to nail that down a little bit too. To if you basically are available by phone call and you can respond and be on site, they're going to clarify that a little bit better. So that's some of the other rumor mills that I've heard as well. So Dave, thanks for confirming that there is some action being taken, which is great. We live in a different world now for what's considered, having access to than we did 20 years ago when some of these rules or legislation was originally founded. So there's also the creation of a fund specifically for electricians, and I couldn't see where it was for plumbers, where they're charging an additional $5. Dave, can you confirm one way or another on that?
Yeah, it's for plumbers too. It's for educational, because that money for grant money was kind of wiped away for continuing education. This was to kind of bring back some money back to that. So it's a backdoor approach, but the Plumbing Licensing Board and Electrical Board will be the ones that administer that. It won't go through the UBCC or whatever it is.
The education fund that deals with
For
the
that part,
1% on building permits.
that $5.
Yeah, great, great. So there was some funds and stuff created to allow this type of stuff to all occur. Again, there's going to be some additional clarification, hopefully by rule, that we can then know what to expect. This is some clarification on some of the hours and who would actually be responsible for making the determination whether you're qualified to become a master plumber. So just look through these sections here. If you want to get into this bill, you're looking clear down on line 643 and such, where it starts to talk about some of these journeyman licensed plumber and so on. So just be aware there's changes that have happened or occurred already legislatively that deals with these aspects of an individual license, and very similar things to that occurred for the electricians. So there's a lot to this bill. I mean, you can see I'm now down almost 1,000 lines, and so yeah, it gets a little arduous to go through those, but that's how they make changes, and a lot of people get caught asleep by burying it so far deep into some of these legislation bills. So, okay, so unless I have any other questions on licensure or what that means to you this year, I'm going to jump into the Title 15A, which is the State Construction Code, which we had some changes as well this last legislative cycle, and what that means, as well as I'll cover some of these amendments. Anything else on licensure? Okay. So how the state construction amendments work is they're found in Title 15A and Chapter 3. So you can see the heading on here is statewide amendments incorporated as part of the state construction code. So I've got the free view, I guess, of the IPC here. I just happen to have Chapter 7 pulled up, but you can access this by just typing in free E codes and then go to the 2018 IPC. But this is the code as written nationally, and then you have to look at the Title 15A, Chapter 3 to see how it changed. So I'm going to go back to this to show you how you can, you've got the residential code. So if you're a residential, primarily dealing with residential as a plumbing contractor, you'll want to look at Part 2. I'm going to go into Part 3 that deals with just pretty much all plumbing in general. So you can see they've got it broken up into chapters 1 and 2, which is administrative and definitions. There's a few definitions in there on backflow technicians and some of those things, potable water, what that means, but really not a whole lot that's real significant. But when we get into chapters 3, if I go into here, I'm going to jump back between this code and what's actually written in the national IPC. So you can see the difference, because if you just bought a code book and that's all you're making reference to, you may or may not be aware that there's been changes. So, for example, in Section 312 of the IPC, I think my mouse may have just died. Okay, yep. So I've got Section 311.1 has been deleted. I've got 312.3, which is our testing requirement. If you guys have been in my classes and recall, one of the big changes a couple of years ago has been that they now prohibit air being used as a testing on any non-metallic piping. So if I come into Section 3 here and I go down to 312, I'm going to see that basically the use of air testing plastic type pipes and stuff is prohibited by the national code. So this is what the code book's going to read, pretty much prohibiting the use of air. And if I go into the state amendment, we're going to see this big added section, and this is Section 3. says IPC Section 312.3, the following is added at the end of the paragraph. Where water is not available at the construction site or where freezing conditions limit the use of water on the construction site, plastic, drainage, and VIM pipe may be permitted to be tested with air. The following procedures shall be followed. And this is where it gets a little fun. Number 1, contractor shall recognize that plastic is extremely brittle at lower temperatures and can explode, causing serious injury or death. Ultimately, that's what led to the international circuit of prohibiting the use of air in plastic pipe. You fill it up in the morning when it's nice and cool. You leave the site. You had it tested at 5 pounds. 2 hours later, when the inspector or somebody else that's working on the site shows up, the sun's been baking on it for a little while. Now you've got 8, 10, 12 psi on a pipe that's not rated for that temperature or that much pressure on the inside. Becomes a ticking time bomb, or can. So that's the recognition they want you to have as a contractor. And then number 2, contractor assumes all liability for injury or death or persons or damage to property or for claims for labor and or material arising from alleged failure of the system during testing with air or compressed gases. So I don't claim to be legal representation. I'm not an attorney, but that pretty much right here puts a pretty big burden on you as a contractor if you're using air to test your piping with. Pretty much naming you as the sole responsible party for any injury that's caused, just as a heads up. If you do test with air, you should recognize this could be a potential problem. And number 3, proper personal protective equipment, including safety eyewear and protective headgear, should be worn by all individuals in the area where an air or gas test is being conducted. Don't know how many of us are actually ensuring that our guys have that protective gear. I've never seen it. So, number 4, contractors shall take all precautions necessary to limit the pressure within the plastic piping. Again, if you're testing at 5 pounds, make sure it stays as close to that or as much as possible. And number 5 tells us it shall not ever be in excess of 6 psi. It even goes to tell us the level of gauge we can put on that piping to ensure we're less than 6 psi. And again, this is for any plastic type pipes. With that being said, number 6 comes into play as well. Pressure gauge shall be monitored during the test period, which should not exceed 15 minutes. So this is where it gets a little difficult. I mean, I'm a jurisdiction that has AM/PM schedules. I have no idea when my guy's going to show up on your job. We have a pretty limited staff, and you put the test on the night before, come on, or the night, everything else, inspector shows up the next day. Technically, that doesn't meet this state law. I don't know who's going to really worry about that unless what this comes down to is if someone gets injured. All this can be asked as part of the investigation through OSHA or whoever else. This is basically a standard they can fall back on. So just be aware that this law exists is why I'm showing you this tonight. Got 312.5 as well, kind of the same thing with it expands a little bit farther on limitations of use of air, basically. And you'll see the same language also amending the same provision in the IRC. So this one's for the testing of water, plastic water pipes, not the drain waste. Basically limiting you to 50 psi, but not more than 80 psi. Again, this is if you're using air. And again, the test should not exceed 15 minutes. So with the last couple of code cycles as well, we've had quite a bit of expansion on the certified backflow preventer.
I'm sorry, I have a quick question.
Oh, sure.
So typically throughout my entire career, inspectors have been calling for 100 pounds of pressure on a water pipe system. So if it's at 80, are they, can they fail me up at that?
They could, but
because right here, like you just brought up, it says 80 or no more than 80 pounds. So is that the now standard in Utah?
This is what the law says. Now, what the field practice is, you and I know, is different. I have operating pressures in my own community that are in excess of 100 pounds. And technically, if you're using water to do that test, you are supposed to test at the operating pressure anyway, right? This is only if you're testing with air. Now, I don't know that a lot of cities are holding to this to the degree that they're going to fail you if you test it greater than 80. This is more or less a safety backdrop in case of injury. Then this is what they're going to hold you culpable to. So that's why I'm bringing it up. This is done by legislation. This is what is the active written law. And in the case of a problem, this is what's going to stand in courts. In fact, I think I was just out on a job today, and it was at 100 psi. I did not fail them. I also did not get injured, so I wasn't worried about it.
Well, I guess my actual question is if it's under 100 psi, if the inspector is not savvy with this new code change, can I argue that fact?
Tell you because it's less than 100.
Yes.
That's a good question because technically they should not be in excess of this. The caveat is if you're testing with water, it should be at the pressure available on the site. So this is only if it's using air. I don't know that a lot of jurisdictions are even aware of this amendment and the limitation of 80 psi on water piping systems. Don't know that I want to go around and, I guess, make them aware of it. But if they're failing you for less than 100 psi because that's their standard, technically they're in violation of what's called professional misconduct on an inspector. And I believe I covered that last spring. There are provisions in state law that are very similar to yours as a contractor of what's considered professional misconduct. And one of those are if an inspector is enforcing something that's materially outside of the state adopted codes, they could actually be reported to DOPL and their license could be put in probation, suspended or revoked, just like the same ability that you have as a contractor for professional misconduct. So if it's causing you issues, you could bring it to their attention if they continue to violate that and cause you problems. This is the state law. You should make them aware of this, and if they don't back off, then your other alternative is to go to DOPL.
Yeah, cool. Thank you. That answers that completely.
That's why I say I am an advocate. I'm probably different than most inspectors you'll probably ever run into because I see all sides. I was a contractor, before, an inspector now. I'll probably be a contractor when I get done inspecting because I can't stand public service too long. But there are a lot of bad inspectors out there, and oftentimes they don't realize that changes occur that are there for a reason. In fact, a lot of the legislation that is against inspectors or changes in these amendments are to ease the installation, but yet not to the degree that it doesn't make it safe. And I know a lot of inspectors have animosity towards legislation that keeps coming at them. They feel frustrated in doing their job, but they got to realize they should be part of the team, not a hindrance to the work that's going on. So, and this is one of those, it gives us some direct guidance. Still ensures a safe installation out there. If your system is in excess of 80 psi, the code already requires you to do what? Back that pressure off. So you're supposed to then scale it back. And so with that same understanding, why it cognitively just makes sense to test it at that limiting level of 80 psi. Your pipe might be rated for higher pressures up to 150 psi or whatever else it may be. Doesn't mean we need to test to the maximum on there. In fact, we're probably voiding warranties if we take it to the maximum psi rating of a piping system. Makes sense to me to back it down to the 80 psi as well. That's what our pressure regulator is going to bump it back to anyway, because our pressures are in excess of that. Okay, any other questions on this section of the code? Okay, so that's the changes in Chapter 3. So just be aware there's that testing requirement, and it goes quite in depth on what we can or can't do. The other one I want to jump to real quick, because it looks like we're running out of time, is in Chapters 5 and 6. Well, Chapter 4 has a good one. Chapter 4 goes into the tables of how many fixtures are required, and if you have to have a floor drain in like a commercial restroom, you pretty much have to have a floor drain installed. So it goes into the required fixtures and stuff. But in Chapter 5, we have the requirement for the water heater that we deal with. Well, let me jump back to Chapter 4, because there's another aspect in there too that we need to cover. So it gives you some options for different types of occupancy groups, and this is where we get the diaper changing facilities, which doesn't really affect you so much, but it does affect the size of a restroom by the designer, because now these child changing stations have to be installed everywhere for accessibility purposes. But if we go down to number 2, we have the category called automatic clothes washer safe pans. It says it has to be installed according to 504.7, which is our water heater emergency drain pans. So that is it's the same provisions in there. So what this allows us to do is our laundry trays, if we don't want to connect it into our waste stack, we could actually now have a relief or a drain of that then just goes out and discharges out to grade if we wanted to, because we have that same option with water heaters. The thing I don't like about this is it's kind of indicating or telling me that I have to meet these specifications, and so sometimes your standard laundry trays that are provided out there don't always meet that exact parameters, but yet they would meet it if they're just a laundry tray and not a automatic clothes washer safe pan. This alludes me to say that, I have to have tin, or I have to have plastic that's so thick, and so on and so forth. The size has to be so much wider than the appliance, yada, yada, yada. So I still think we have other provisions we can use under other sections of the code, but this opens it up to where we can actually not tie into our drain waste system, and gives us another option where we can actually take it out to the side of the building and just discharge it above grade somewhere. So I'm hoping that was the intent of that. That's kind of where I'm using it for. But in number 3, you've got the public toilet room shall be equipped with at least one floor drain. This used to have, if it had at least a multiple water closets, so if you had more than just one water closet and a lav, you didn't have to, but this one pretty much now says all restrooms now have to have a floor drain. So just be aware that that's probably going to be creeping up on you on some of your newer plans, that's a requirement that they have to meet. So if you don't see it, you might want to ask that question, because it's going to be a little harder for you to put it in later down the road when you've already got the slab in place and you get to the final inspection and your inspector says, where's your floor drain? So any questions on that section in Chapter 4? I'm going to bump to Chapter 6, and 7 has something in there as well. Just real quick to finish out, we'll finish on this. It's actually going to go into some backflow, but we're short on time here. But there was an omission in the plumbing code when the 2018 edition was created, that we used to have the prohibition of piping above a food prep area, and it disappeared out of the 2018 edition when it was printed. And typically when something disappears out of the code, it has a black arrow next to it indicating that was a change, but that wasn't the case. And so I've asked several questions with ICC and everything else, and they don't know how or why it was not there. They've actually got some erratas that put it back in, but by amendment, we've actually added that back in to the code. So a couple other things in Chapter 6 is the booster systems. You've got sinks if you've got metered faucets for food service establishments. Make sure you've got 15-second reactivation between uses, so it's not too short a time. The accessibility code already requires a minimum of a 10-second relay. That just bumps it up to 15. So but there's quite a bit of changes in Section 6 and 7. And this is giving you a bunch of guidelines for backflow prevention, which is pretty much consistent with the manufacturer's data anyway, requiring at least a 12-inch clearance off a grade, no more than 30 inches typically. But this gives us the ability to actually put backflow assemblies higher off the ground, but if they're too high, then we actually have to provide a platform for service and testing of that backflow. So just be aware there's a lot of changes in Chapter 6 and 7, so I'd encourage you to go in there, compare the amendments versus what we have under the actual written code from ICC, because there are some changes. With that, I'll turn it back over to Dave for any other questions if we want to wrap that up.
Thank you very much, Jason. We will have this available if you want to see it again, review it again. We'll have this on our YouTube channel, probably be Monday. But thank you very much, Jason, for this. And if there's no other further questions, we'll end our CE class. Thank you, everybody.
Okay, well, Dave, I'm not seeing any other questions.
I have a question for you.
Sure, Rob.
So like maybe I'll give you a call sometime and just say, okay, hey, this is what I want to do. Tell me what I need to have as far as licensing.
Okay.
I'm still so confused. You got so many numbers going on. B100, S350, BR2. Man, I'm so confused on what we need to have. I mean,
sure.
I like I said, I have I think a P200. And this new 3-foot rule, I got no idea, do I need a different license to be able to do excavation outside of a home? We only do service. We don't do any new construction. I mean, we'll remodel a basement or finish a basement. We do excavation, sewer lines, water lines, stuff like that. Does all that work with the P200?
Yeah, I think the question that Dave was going back to is there's under the excavator's license, they have this provision that allows them to put in sewer mains, even though the sewer mains or laterals, if we want to call it that, I guess, is actually covered under the scope of the IPC. The lateral is actually by definition considered part of the plumbing system on a building. And so this goes back a long ways in licensure for the excavators, because most of them are who are hired to put these in on new developments, and so they put that provision of what used to be the 3 feet up to the foundation. They had jurisdiction, and that 3 point on, the plumbers took responsibility, and that allowed them to do that as basically an incidental part of the excavation license overall for that scope. Plumbers, if you're a plumbing only company, I don't know that that's going to be a big issue. I've never had Doppel indicate that that's been an issue. They've never approached me on it to say that plumbers can't do that, because I've worked with plumbers. They're very much like you. All they do is tear up old Orangeburg piping from the road into a home and replace it. And I have never had Doppel raise an eyebrow at that as a licensed plumber.
Okay. And then one other question is, okay, say one of my guys, as they're fixing a water line inside, they cut through an electrical line. I call an electrical contractor and say, hey, can you come out and fix this for me? They send me a bill. Is that allowed, or do I need a general contractor's license to do that?
So that gets interesting, because if you're in a residential occupant group, have the owner of the property make that call. That's how you should legally be handling it. But yes, you cannot hire an electrician under a job you've been commissioned to go out and do. You come in and do that repair work. Technically, the easy way is have the homeowner call that electrician and have the homeowner deal with them directly.
And then the homeowner has to pay, or can I pay? Because obviously my guy messed up.
Yeah, how the payment occurs, that's between you guys and whatever. But as far as the call and the actual commissioning of that electrician should be through a general contractor where it's residential. The homeowner is exempt from having a general contractor license. They can actually hire anybody they want,
Okay.
as long as they're licensed for the work they're hiring them for.
Okay, that works. I mean, that's not a big deal. So
Yeah, what that does, that actually
works.
relieves you as the general contractor, and you don't have to deal with that responsibility. I mean, yeah, you're helping them out by giving them someone to come out and fix it and stuff, but they should be the ones that's dealing with that negotiation.
Okay. I guess we're good with the P200.
Yep.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, thanks, Jason.
Okay, you bet.
Take care.
You as well. We'll see you next month.
Okay. He does an excellent job.